Before we move off of healthcare, anything else you want to say on that topic?
Well, it's always a difficult topic, and we do want to be sure that we are encouraging people to look at all the options that are out there. Healthcare savings accounts are not something that are very well advertised, but I encourage especially young people. We find people between the ages of 22 and 32 are a big group of people who say, I don't need health insurance or I can't afford health insurance. And there are policies that are very inexpensive where they can get catastrophic insurance. So if they fall off of a ladder and break their leg and need surgery, they're covered. Or if they get pneumonia and they go into the hospital, they're covered. And I encourage them to go out and look at a health savings account. You can do it for about $125 a month. It does have a big deductible, which is going to require you to save and put some in the bank. But at least you do have coverage should something happen to you that's catastrophic. And I know a number of young people who have had, one person I know had an appendectomy, an emergency appendectomy, and has these high hospital costs. Another one had the H1N1 and ended up being in the hospital down at Vanderbilt for 4 weeks in the intensive care unit. Wow. I'm not sure he'll ever pay off those bills. So having catastrophic insurance when you're young is very, very important. So I'm going to say to all my young people, get out there and get your catastrophic insurance.
Yeah, you just never know. We've had several conversations in the past about legislation and stricter laws regarding sexual offenders. You've sponsored some additional bills this session. Can you give us an update on what legislation was passed last year and what you're working on for this year?
Well, let me tell you what I'm working on for this year because you've all seen it in the media. Most recently, I was made aware of a physician who was operating here in our state. He came from another state and got his license. Now, I will tell you, he got his license here in this state, to practice here in this state, before we had background checks, criminal background checks. So it's been many years ago. But he was a sex offender, a violent sex offender in another state. He did get his license here. And we just found out recently that he was on the sex offender registry, but the Board of Medical Examiners did not know about him being on the sex offender registry. And what happened was he violated his probation by setting up a practice too close to a daycare center. And he was picked up on that violation. It made the news. There was a mama who did not even know about this, who took her child to him. She was uncomfortable about something that happened in the exam room, went home, looked on the sex offender registry, and up pops the doctor. And I was called about it, and of course, you know, at that point in time, before I looked at all the information, I said, what the heck, how can we have that happening? Yeah. So my bill, I do have a bill that says that if we have a violent sex offender, that doctor cannot practice in this state, and that their license will be revoked if we do find. And let's just say that a doctor is practicing and he has gone through all of the procedures and he was clear at that time, but then down the road something does happen and he becomes on the sex offender registry. We now are in this legislation having a communication between the TBI that has the sex offender registry and the Board of Medical Examiners. Now, I don't want to throw the doctors under the bus here because you also have to realize that we have other health-related boards besides the Board of Medical Examiners. And so this now has opened up the discussion about all of those other health-related fields, such as physical therapy or nursing. And how do we communicate between the TBI and our health-related boards? And so now we're broadening what we're looking at and deciding to look not just at this one category of physicians, but all health-related boards where you would have patient contact. So it's opened up a big can of worms that we need to look at. And we just have to be sure that we are protecting the public. And that's what these bills hopefully will do.
Thank goodness for that mother being that aware.
Yes, yes, yeah. She certainly made us aware of a hole in our system.
Yeah, definitely. A recent federal report named Nashville's Juvenile Detention Center as having one of the worst rates of sexual abuse in the country. What can you tell us about that situation?
Oh, another very disturbing piece of information that you get thrown at you. And I'm on the Select Committee of Children and Youth, and we had a hearing this past week, and there was testimony about what is happening at these centers. And it's devastating to me to think that we have children who are already vulnerable. We take them out of their homes and out of their situations in their community and put them into a school, and then we're not protecting them and taking care of them. And so we did have the administration from these facilities before our committee and had the testimony, and I'm sure there's going to be some legislation that is a result of this. And one of the questions that I asked was, when we interview these children that have come forward to say that they've been sexually abused. We're interviewing them right now with the personnel in those facilities, and we've got to get outside of that. And I don't know by rule or whether we have to do this by statute, but we have to make sure that these children are taken off campus and that they're interviewed by an independent source, and in particular interviewed by forensic interviewers, because forensic interviewers are specifically trained to interview children who may have had some sort of a sexual encounter. And we need to make sure that that forensic interview is being done and being done properly and being recorded so that whatever comes out of there, that investigation can go forward to law enforcement.
I've often heard when it comes to children and sexual abuse that they will speak once, and if they don't feel heard, they'll often clam up. So that
Yes.
seems very crucial.
And the environment in which they have that interview, and if it's done by someone who understands and has been well trained, makes them feel much more comfortable and also allows them to be able to speak freely.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's talk about guns. We talked last year about some of the changes to the gun laws, specifically the Guns and Bars bill, passed last year but ruled unconstitutional later on. Will we see that reappear this session?
You know, I really don't know how much we're going to talk about that. I think most of my colleagues feel that we probably need to set that aside right now because the decision that was made by a judge in Davidson County is now being appealed. And until we know what the appeals court says, we may be acting upon this and doing something that isn't even necessary, or we may not be addressing the issue that is found in the appeals court. And so I think that most of my colleagues right now, at least the discussion that we have had immediately getting back into session, is that we really felt this was something we needed to set aside until we got more direction from the court, and then we could address the specifics of what the court comes back on their ruling.
We've just got about a minute left, but we did want to ask about the wine sales in grocery stores coming up again this year. It's the fourth year it's been filed. What are you thinking this year?
Well, I'd love to get this to the committee and get full discussion and get it to the floor and get it voted on. It's been around for long enough, it's been discussed long enough, and I think it's been studied long enough. And I think it's time for people to vote on it. But I'm not sure you're going to see that this year, Nancy. I think, again, there's a dragging of people's feet along those lines. I don't happen to be in any of the committees where this is heard. It's heard in the Commerce Committee. But I just think it's high time we go ahead and move this forward and get it voted on.
Been talked about long enough.
Yes.
Any final words on this session and what's coming up?
Well, I do want to let people know that I'm working very hard and I am studying very hard, as I have always done in the past. This is a difficult budget year, and most importantly, it's making sure that we have essential services for the people. And as always, I'd like to hear from the constituents as we move along, and they can either email me or call my office. I get very little snail mail anymore. Most of it is email, but I appreciate hearing from constituents because I am their senator and their representative.
All right. Thank you so much for taking time to be here with us.
You're welcome.
Well, if you'd like more information about the legislation Senator Black is sponsoring, as she said, you can reach her by email or you can give her a call at 615-741-1999. You can also log on to her website at dianeblack.org. And we hope you will join us next time right here on Inside Politics.